person in any sport has exemplified the single-mindedness, the relentless pursuit of excellence than Ben Hogan in golf. He became the most accurate shot maker and the most formidable competitor in the game. No one ever had greater or more exact control of the golf ball than did Hogan. He had unbending determination, his concentration was total, and his self-control was complete. His capacity for pulling out that little bit extra in a crisis is legendary. He was the most courageous golfer of all time. Ben Hogan came closer to golfing perfection than any player in the history of the game.
Mr. Hogan and I have had a tremendous relationship through the years, and I've got a tremendous amount of respect, care very much for Mr. Hogan, always have and always will. Tremendous influence on my career, and probably on a lot of players' careers. Tremendous athlete, and I think probably one of the greatest credits to the game of golf. He's really a professional's professional.
Despite his achievements, the man himself would remain an enigma throughout his career. To try to understand this person, one must start at the beginning. The year was 1912. The Titanic sank in the North Atlantic. Ty Cobb hit .420 for the Detroit Tigers. Harry Vardon won the British PGA. And on August 13th, at this site on Harris Street in Dublin, Texas, William Benjamin Hogan was born. His father, Chester Hogan, was a mechanic and a blacksmith. But in those days, everybody worked, including a very young Ben Hogan. Only back then, everyone called him Benny. Benny's first job was carrying bricks used for paving the streets of Dublin. In 1921, the Hogan family moved to Fort Worth, and in February 1922, Chester Hogan, ill for more than a year, took his own life. 1924, Texas elects Ma Ferguson, America's first woman governor. Robert Tyre Jones Jr. of Atlanta wins his first U.S. Amateur Championship. Walter Hagen won the first of his 4 straight PGA titles. And in Fort Worth, Texas, 11-year-old Benny Hogan was hawking Star Telegram newspapers at the Texas and Pacific Depot, a territory he had fought for and won with his fists. Then he heard he could make more money as a caddy, carrying golf bags at Glen Garden Country Club. He applied, and once again it took winning a fist fight to secure a place in the caddy ranks. Their pay? 60 cents for 18 holes. And as part of his initiation, he was rolled down this hill in a barrel. At Glen Garden, he met another caddy who would become a close friend and rival, Byron Nelson.
I won the caddy championship, but Ben Hogan and I tied. We had been played 9 holes, and the members caddied for us, and we played 9 holes, and we tied. And so they wanted to play off. So we went and played another 9, and we par 37 on the first 9 out there, and we both shot 40. And we were just kids, you know, and then we played off, and I shot 39, you shot 40, so I eked him out with 1 shot.
Benny regularly caddied for Ed Stewart, a young member of Glen Garden who would take the time to show Benny why and how he hit each shot. The pro, Ted Longworth, taught Benny more of the basics, including the Vardon grip. But except for once a year, he could only play on the public courses around Fort Worth. Even then, he could not play often because times were tough, money was tight, and he felt he had to work as much as possible in order to help his mother with the household expenses.
My family wasn't rich, they were poor. I feel sorry for rich kids now, I really do, because they're never going to have the opportunity I had, because I knew tough things, and I had a tough day all my life, and I can handle tough things. They can't. And every day that I progressed was a joy to me, and I recognized it every day.
1927, Charles Lindbergh flew the Atlantic Ocean solo and became a worldwide celebrity. On June 4th at Worcester Country Club in Massachusetts, the Ryder Cup Series begins with a 9 1/2 to a 2 1/2 United States victory. On June 17th, Tommy Armour, who had earned his college degree in his native Scotland and became a highly decorated World War I hero, broke into the big time by winning the United States Open at Oakmont. He had huge, powerful hands and a thirst to match. The Silver Scot was the only player who could match Walter Hagen drink for drink. On November 5th at Cedar Crest Country Club in Dallas, Walter Hagen defeated Joe Ternisa 1-up in the first PGA ever played in the South. Hagan was not on his game and trailed Ternisa after 28 holes. But at the 29th, Hagan evened the match and won with this putt on the 36th hole. This was Hagan's fifth and final PGA victory. In Fort Worth, Texas, 15-year-old Benny Hogan is a student at Central High School, but his mind is always on golf. In 1928, the former caddy and natty dresser from White Plains, New York, Johnny Farrell, wins 7 of his 22 career victories. Wee Bobby Cruikshank wins the LA Open and 2 other tour events in a 5-week period. And at age 16, Benny Hogan reached the finals of the Fort Worth City Championships. And later in the year, he got to the finals of the Rivercrest Invitational, but was beaten by Fort Worth City champion Hap Massengill. 1929, Arnold Palmer is born in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Bobby Jones defeats Al Espinosa by 23 strokes in the 36-hole finals of the U.S. Open at Winged Foot. In April, the Ryder Cup competition is resumed at Leeds, England. British captain George Duncan humiliates American captain Walter Hagan 10-8 en route to a 7-5 victory over the United States team.
I remember one thing about that match. I was in the washroom with Hagan, and he didn't know that Duncan was in one of those suits in there, and Hagan says to me, he says, "What do you know?" He says, "I found out where Duncan's is going to play, and I'm playing against him. That's a sure point." Well, Duncan went out and beat him 10-9.
Walter Hagan defeats dapper Johnny Farrell at Muirfield, Scotland, to win his 3rd British Open in 6 years. This would prove to be Hagan's last Open championship. In Texas, Ben Hogan is the first flight runner-up in the De Leon Dublin Invitational. Later in the year, he and his friend Ralph Gouldall from Dallas drove a Model T Ford to St. Louis to play in a tournament. 1930, Bobby Jones has the greatest year of any golfer in history. He won the British Open and the British Amateur and the U.S. Open and the U.S. Amateur. 2 months after winning the Grand Slam, Jones announced his retirement from serious competition. Walter Hagan tells the press he's going to cut back his tournament schedule to play more exhibitions. Hagan won 4 U.S. Open tournaments, but never won an Open in which Bobby Jones played. Tommy Armour wins the 1930 PGA and Canadian Open titles. Ben Hogan entered the Texas Open at Breckenridge Park in San Antonio. Just before the first round, he announced that he would be playing as a professional. He shot 78-73 the first 2 rounds and did not qualify for the finals. 1931, the Depression has settled in. 5 million Americans are out of work. Golf courses were closing, and golf went into a period of decline. Whiffy Cox is the #1 ranked pro golfer in the U.S. In June, the United States hands Great Britain a crushing 9-3 Ryder Cup defeat in sweltering heat at Scioto Country Club in Columbus, Ohio. On July 6th, Billy Burke, the one-time steel worker from Cleveland, wins the U.S. Open, the first major tournament won with steel shafts. 18 years after he defeated golfing giants Harry Vardon and Ted Ray to win the U.S. Open title, Francis Ouimet wins the U.S. Amateur for the 2nd time.
There's very little I can say. I'd be telling an untruth if I said that I wasn't extremely happy that I won today.
Ben Hogan played in a tournament in Shreveport, Louisiana. He did not win anything and had to sell his watch to pay his caddy. 1932, Gene Sarazen invents the sand wedge and uses it to win his 2nd U.S. Open championship. Down in Augusta, Georgia, a dream comes true. The Augusta National Golf Club, designed by Bobby Jones and Alistair McKenzie, opened in Augusta. Sweet-swinging McDonald Smith wins his 3rd Los Angeles Open. McDonald is quite possibly the finest golfer never to win a major championship. The American Left-Handers Golf Association is founded. Babe Ruth is elected president. Henry Picard wins his first of 25 tour titles, the Mid-South Open. In January of 1932, Ben left Fort Worth for his first real try on the pro golf circuit.
I left here with $75 in my pocket, and I went with Ralph Hutchison and Jack Rout. I would win $25, $50. I was always last if I got my money at all. And as I say, I was a terrible player. And after New Orleans, I wasn't in the money, and I was broke. I had to come home.
1933, 51-year-old Franklin Delano Roosevelt is sworn in as president. Johnny Goodman, an amateur from Omaha, Nebraska, wins the U.S. Open, the last amateur to do so. In England, the Ryder Cup matches are won by the British team 6 1/2 to 5 1/2. Flamboyant United States Captain Walter Hagan and conservative British Captain J.H. Taylor are not endeared to one another.
To re-echo the words of His Royal Highness and begged to thank the American nation for having sent over such a strong and representative golf team to play in this contest.
At St. Andrews, the British Open is won by Denny Shute, who defeats powerful Craig Wood. Benny Hogan is now working as a professional at Nolan River Country Club in Cleburne, Texas. 1934, on March 22nd, at precisely 9:45 in the morning, Indianapolis pro Ralph Stonehouse hits the first shot in the first Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia. Henry Cotton wins the British Open at Royal St. George's in England.
I don't smile so much, maybe, but inside I'm pretty happy right now.
Paul Runyon leads the PGA Tour money list with $6,767 in winnings. Fort Worth businessman Marvin Leonard lends Benny Hogan $225 for yet another failed try at becoming a tour player. Benny returned to Nolan River Country Club and began a determined regimen of practice.
You're talking about practicing. I just love to practice. Hit all kinds of shots around the green, playing holes in my mind, and it was a great satisfaction to me. Not for winning a tournament or anything like that. I got great satisfaction each and every day.
1935, Pittsburgh pro Sam Parks wins the U.S. Open at Oakmont. None of the 20 leaders break 75 in the final round. In September, the Ryder Cup matches are played at Ridgewood Country Club in New Jersey. The American team, with such experienced players as Hagan, Saracen, Revolta, Runyon, and Dutra, have too much firepower for the young British team, and the United States wins 9-3. Lawson Little wins the U.S. and British amateur titles for the second straight year, the only man ever to accomplish this feat. Almost unbeatable at match play, Little wins 32 straight matches against the best amateurs in the world. His flawless short game and the 26 clubs in his bag arouse the ire of opponents and the USGA alike. Ben Hogan takes an assistant pro job at the new Oakhurst Country Club in Fort Worth, and on Sunday, April 14th, Ben Hogan and Valerie Fox are married. 1936, America's Jesse Owens wins 4 gold medals in the Berlin Olympics. Denny Shute wins the PGA title, beating long-hitting Jimmy Thompson 3-2 at Pinehurst, North Carolina. The last major tournament ever won with hickory shafts is won by amateur Johnny Fisher. America is still mired in the Depression. Roosevelt is reelected, and golf is in the years of transition. The game desperately needs new heroes to fill the shoes of Jones and Hagan. The leading names of the day: Craig Wood, Horton Smith, Harry Cooper, Denny Shute, Henry Picard, and Paul Runyon were all excellent players, but the golfing public wanted a new superstar. Most knowledgeable observers thought the heir apparent for the honor of golf's top player would be Lawson Little, who had recently turned pro. He was a long, straight hitter with a magical short game, and he had won 4 major amateur tournaments in the previous 2 years. Although Little would have some good years on the tour, he was never the dominant player at stroke play he had been at match play. Perhaps his greatest contribution was the public attention he brought to the game, which set the stage for 3 players who would dominate golf for the next 18 years. John Byron Nelson Jr., Samuel Jackson Sneed, and William Benjamin Hogan. 1937, Harry Vardon, who had a strong influence on Ben Hogan, dies at age 67. San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge opens, and Joe Louis wins the heavyweight title from Jimmy Braddock. The U.S. was slowly climbing out of the Depression, and prize money for the U.S. Open had been increased to $6,000, with $1,000 going to the winner, Ralph Gouldall, Ben Hogan's boyhood friend from Texas. Sam Snead was second. Sam had come out of the Virginia hills and started winning almost immediately. At the U.S. Open, he was 5 under par after 3 rounds, and it appeared he might win the biggest tournament of all on his first try. But Gouldall shot a final round 69 to break the Open record of 282, beating Sam by a single stroke. At the Masters, Ben's boyhood friends Byron Nelson and Ralph Gouldall staged a great final day battle. Gouldall held a 4-stroke advantage at the 12th tee, but Nelson made up 6 strokes on Gouldall in the next 2 holes and went on to win by 2 shots. Ben Hogan failed to qualify for either the Masters or the Open that year. Ben also failed to qualify for the Ryder Cup team that year. The matches were played in June at Ainsdale Golf Club in Southport, England. The team, captained by Walter Hagen, won for the first time on British soil, 8-4. Because of World War II, it would be the last matches played for 10 years, and it would be Hagen's 6th and final time as team captain.
Today I had the greatest thrill of my golfing life, and the matches were very, very close. It was only toward the last few matches that I didn't have to eat the cigarettes, I could smoke them.
Earlier in the year, Ben had told Valerie it's now or never. So they took the $1,450 they had saved, bought a used 1934 maroon Buick, and set out to follow the sun. Checks were small and infrequent. Ben's best finish that year was 3rd in the New York Open at Lake Placid. 1938, on January the 1st, after a 1-year grace period, the USGA instituted the 14-club rule. Ben's newfound friend, Henry Picard, plays great golf to win the Masters by 2 strokes over Ralph Gouldall and Harry Cooper. 2 young players who did not finish in the top 24 are Sam Snead and Ben Hogan. President Roosevelt raises the minimum wage to 40 cents an hour, and Ben and Valerie Hogan arrive in Oakland, California, nearly broke and needing desperately to win some money.
We were driving to Oakland, California, and Valerie said, you know how much money we have? And I said, yes, I know. We had $86 left out of the $1,400. So she said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, Valerie, we made a deal to spend $1,400. We have 86 left, and we're going to Oakland. So we shopped all around for a hotel room, the least expensive we could find, and wasn't eating very well, and buying no clothes at all. And anyway, the Leamington Hotel gave the pros a rate, and it was the best rate I could find in all of Oakland. So we stayed there. Okay, the morning of the tournament, I was driving a red Buick, maroon Buick, and across the street, there was a parking lot there. It's a gravel, of course, and I'm sure there's a big building there nowadays. But in those days, in the first round of the tournament, I had a fairly early starting time and left the hotel after breakfast. Went across the street, and my car was jacked up, and my 2 rear wheels were sitting on rocks, and they'd even taken the jack. So I came back to the hotel and bummed a ride with somebody. I can't remember who now. Anyway, I got to the course, and it was late, and I couldn't hit any practice balls because I'd be disqualified, you know, give you financial leeway. Well, I need more than 5 minutes. So I played, and I won $385. It's the biggest check I've ever seen in my life. And I'm quite sure it'll be the biggest check I'll ever see.
That check was the turning point for the Hogans and strengthened their resolve to continue the tour. Ralph Gouldall wins his 2nd straight U.S. Open title at Cherry Hills in Denver. Ben did not qualify and watched his friend Gouldall from the sidelines. Paul Runyon trounces Sam Snead in the PGA at Shawnee Country Club. Sam, in his 2nd year on the tour, wins 7 times and leads the tour in winnings. Byron Nelson finished the year with 2 victories at Thomasville and the Miami 4-Ball, teaming with partner Jug McSpadden. The highlight of 1938 for Ben and Valerie Hogan occurred at the Hershey, Pennsylvania Country Club. Ben received a personal invitation from his friend Henry Picard, the Hershey professional, to play in the fourball. Ben teamed with Vic Gezzi and won the tournament, his very first win on the tour. Ben finished the year as the 11th ranked player and 15th on the money list, winning $4,150. 1939, Gone with the Wind premieres in Atlanta, and in Augusta, Ralph Gouldall finally wins the Masters after 2 straight second-place finishes. His record of 279 stood for 14 years. Sam Snead finished second, Byron Nelson was 7th, and Ben Hogan was 9th. On June 12th at the U.S. Open, Sam Snead takes an 8 on the final hole to lose the title to Byron Nelson. The U.S. Open Championship will continue to elude Sam throughout his entire career.
I lie in bed sometimes think about it. I could have won easily 15 U.S. Opens.
At the PGA at Paumanok Country Club, Henry Picard defeats Nelson 1-up in 37 holes. Ben Hogan is the co-medalist and reaches the quarterfinals. Ben is the 9th ranked player and 7th on the money list, winning $5,600. But still, he had never won an individual tournament. His teenage contemporaries, Nelson and Gouldall, had won 4 Western Opens, 3 U.S. Opens, and 2 Masters. 1940, Jack Nicklaus is born in Columbus, Ohio. The PGA announced the total prize money on the tour for the year was $117,000. Jimmy DeMeritt won the first of 3 Masters titles, beating fellow Texan Lloyd Mangrum. Byron Nelson defeated Sam Snead 1-up at Hershey Country Club to win his first PGA crown. Ben lost in the quarterfinals. In early 1940, Ben had still not won an individual tournament, but fortunes were about to change for the little man from Texas who had struggled so hard for so long. In the U.S. Open at Cleveland's Canterbury Country Club, Ben shot .290 and tied for 5th, only 3 shots back of the winner, Lawson Little. This 5th place finish started a streak that would land Ben in the money in 56 consecutive tournaments, a new tour record. On March 21st, after almost 9 long years as a pro, Ben finally won a tournament, and it came at the North and South Open at Pinehurst, played over the storied number 2 course, proclaimed by architect Donald Ross as his masterpiece. He carded rounds of 66, 67, 74, and 70. He still had that one bad round, but managed to win by 3 strokes over Snead and 11 better than Nelson. The next 2 weeks he continued the string, winning at Greensboro and Asheville. Interestingly, this man who would later develop serious putting problems was at this time among the best. In 3 tournament wins, 216 holes, he had 3-putted only twice. Later in 1940, Ben added the good all-round robin title and became the year's leading money winner with $10,655. Purses were small and tournament sites scattered, so quite often Ben and Byron would travel together. And on many occasions, Louise Nelson and Valerie Hogan would join them on those long drives between tournaments.
Back in those days, the pros that are on the tour either were pros that had come in from Scotland or England somewhere where the game had started, or through the caddy ranks. You learned to caddy, and then you learned the game, and then you started playing because the game was so small in those days.
1941, war was raging in Europe and the Far East. American industry was gearing up for war production. It was the end of the Depression, and golf interest was growing. For Hogan, it was a banner year. He won 5 tournaments. It began when he partnered with Gene Sarazen to win the Miami Fourball. Then for the 2nd straight year, he won at Asheville. He was 4th in the Masters, and at Inverness, he teamed with Jimmy DeMeritt to win the Fourball tournament. He tied for 3rd in the U.S. Open, played for the first and only time at Colonial Country Club in Fort Worth. He followed with wins at the Chicago and Hershey Opens. Again, he was the Barton Trophy winner, and a repeat as the leading money winner, this time a dazzling $18,358. 1942, the beginning of the war years. Hogan began the season by winning the Los Angeles Open. Next, he took the title in the San Francisco Open. Then the tour moved across the country to North Carolina. There he won his 3rd consecutive Asheville Open, and followed that by winning the North and South Open for the 2nd time. He sank this final putt on the 72nd hole to win the first prize of $1,000. Next was the Masters. Ben was playing well, and his 280 total tied for first place. But in the playoff, he lost to his fellow Glengarden caddy and close friend, Byron Nelson. His final title for the season would be at the Rochester Open. But earlier in 1942, he won a tournament that would later assume additional significance for him and for the history of the United States Open Golf Tournament. America was at war, and the USGA chose to avoid the high profile of their Open tournament. So they called it the Hail America Tournament, the wartime version of the U.S. Open. It was played at Chicago's Ridgemore Country Club. In the second round, Ben shot a personal best score of 62, and he played the final 2 rounds with the legendary Bobby Jones. He won the tournament handily, this time beating his friend Nelson by 7 shots. 1943, major tournament play was suspended for the war. March 25th, Ben Hogan became a buck private in the Army Air Corps. In November, he was commissioned Second Lieutenant Ben Hogan and was assigned as a physical training officer at Fort Worth Army Airfield. 1944, although major tournament competition was suspended for the war, many others were played, with the winners being paid off in war bonds. Byron Nelson and Jug McSpadden had physical conditions which precluded them from serving in the armed services, and during this period they totally dominated, becoming known as the Gold Dust Twins. In one stretch of 1945, Nelson won his famous 11 tournaments in a row. Of course, competition was diluted, but Nelson's play was spectacular nonetheless. His stroke average was 68.33, one of the lowest Varden averages of all time. It was then that the press began to refer to Nelson as Mr. Golf. So all through 1943, 44, and most of 45, Hogan served in the Army Air Corps. Lloyd Mangrum became a decorated war hero in Europe. And the legendary Bobby Jones had also donned the uniform of Uncle Sam. They, like millions of other young men, had put their careers on hold. 1945, August, VJ Day, the war was over. Along with millions of others, Captain Ben Hogan received his discharge. Quickly from khaki to the Hogan trademarks of gray, white, and black. He entered the Knoxville Supreme Open at Holston Hills, another of the famous courses by architect Donald Ross. He finished 11 strokes behind the winner, Byron Nelson. The next week in Nashville at Richland Country Club, Hogan regained his touch and blistered the course 19 under par and beat Nelson by 4 shots. Then, perhaps venting a bit of the frustration and resentment of not being able to compete with Nelson during the war years, he was heard to say, "I guess that takes care of Mr. Golf." In the following weeks, he won Open tournaments at Richmond, Montgomery, Orlando, and Portland. So in about 3 months of late 1945, he entered 11 tournaments, won 5 of them, and never finished lower than 3rd in the other 6. But he had not won a major. 1946, a banner year. Hogan won 13 tournaments, but more significantly, among them was his first major. It was the PGA Championship at Portland Country Club, where he defeated Ed Oliver for the title. His total prize money for the year was $42,556. America's post-war economy was booming. Public interest in golf was growing, and out on the tournament trail, competition was fierce. Hogan's intense competitiveness began to cause some strained relations with his boyhood friend Nelson and others. On one occasion, Ben was partnered with his friend Tony Penna. On the first tee, Ben told Tony, "You are the captain." On the 5th green, Tony conceded a 2-foot putt to their opponent, Willie Goggin. On the 6th tee, Ben told Tony, "You are not captain anymore. You can't give a putt of that length to anybody." Most every tournament, it seemed to be Hogan versus Nelson, Snead, or Demerit, with the rest of the field playing for 3rd. In one year, from August 1945 to August 1946, Hogan won 18 tournaments, Nelson 10. Shortly thereafter, Nelson abruptly announced his retirement to his beloved Fairway Ranch, 20 miles north of Fort Worth, and would play in only a few selected tournaments each year.
I left the tour in August of 1946, and during that period of time, I never was able to make a living. Even when I won, I was fortunate. I won 54 tournaments, 5 majors, and I only averaged $14,000 a year. Well, $14,000 then was a lot of money, but in a way, but you had to pay your caddy fees, your hotel, your food, your travel, which is a car, and all your expenses, laundry, cleaning, and so forth. So I didn't make any money playing golf at all. So you had to supplement your income some way. So I was pro at a club, run a club all my life until I left the tour.
Because of Ben's steely-eyed concentration during a tournament, the media often described him as cool and aloof, and at times even combative. Post-war America was on the verge of a serious love affair with golf, and the public was ready for a hero. True, Ben did not have the charismatic appeal of a Jimmy DeMeritt, nor the mountain humor of Sam Snead, but his consummate skill and dedication was appreciated by the burgeoning ranks of golfers everywhere. He became the guide-on to what would become an enormous parade of professional golf. 1946 was also the year he finally faced up to the dreaded hook. He left the tour and went home to Fort Worth. His good friend Henry Picard, a top-ranked player himself, suggested that he learn to fade the ball.
I was hooking so badly that I couldn't get a forward off of the ground. And I had to use iron clips all the time. And after that tournament, I came home, and of course I said to myself, you can't play this way. There's no way to ever win or ever do very well. You're going to have to train yourself to be able to get the ball in flight and hit a high shot when you want to, or a low shot. But for heaven's sakes, you've got to get rid of this hook. Because left to right dog leg, I couldn't play it at all. If I had any trees on the right side, I didn't have room to start my hook out there, and I just couldn't play it at all. So I said, there's something has to be done. So I came home and I spent 2 weeks here, and I woke up one morning and I had an idea how to do this. And this is just about daylight. I went to the golf course and spent all day until dark, and this thing worked like a charm for me.
He experimented with a slight change of grip and a swing modification. It worked. After days on the practice tee, he had perfected the shot. A slight fade at the end with little loss of distance and greater control. Now the ultimate test, tournament competition, and the swing held up. The touring pros noticed the hook was gone, and when they asked about the difference, he said, "I have a secret," but did not explain further. It would be 9 years before he revealed it to Life magazine.
I turned professional actually in 1946, but I didn't really become a good golf player until 1955 when I went to Hogan for a grip change, and he changed my grip and eliminated the fear of a hook, and that's when I really learned to play golf in 1955. That was what we called Hogan's secret back in those days. All the secret was a weak left-hand grip on the club to eliminate the fear of hooking. You could utilize all of your power without the fear of hooking, which was very important to me.
1947, another great year for Hogan. As he had hoped, the secret took more than 1 stroke per round off his score. He won 7 tournaments, beginning with his first Los Angeles Open. Back home in Texas, he won his second Colonial title. Then he teamed with his good friend Jimmy DeMeritt to win the Miami 4-ball. He also captained the Ryder Cup team that defeated Britain 11-1 in Portland, Oregon. Walter Hagen and Craig Wood served as non-playing co-captains. On the British team was a feisty Welshman named Di Rees. He publicly challenged Ben to a 36-hole match play event for $5,000, winner take all, to be played at the San Diego Country Club. When notified of the challenge, Ben said, "I don't know why he wants to play me. He should be practicing." Rees was cocky, but he was also very good. And after 18, Ben was 3 down. But in the afternoon 18, Ben was flawless, closing out the match 6-4. Following the match, Rees was quoted as saying, "I couldn't have lost to a nicer gentleman." 1948, the mighty Babe Ruth died from cancer at age 53, and a new Cadillac could be yours for just $2,833. It was also a very good year for Ben Hogan. It began with 2 highly visible tournaments in California. First, the Los Angeles Open at the Riviera Country Club. He had won the tournament the year before with a 280 total. This year, he shot a final round 67 for a 275 total, beating his old record by 5 strokes. His friend Jimmy DeMeritt was second. It was a good tune-up, too, since Riviera would be the scene of the U.S. Open in June, to be played on a Western course for the first time in history. Next was the Bing Crosby Pro-Am at the Monterey Peninsula. Even in that celebrity-packed field, Hogan was the one to watch, and he won it for the first time. In June, it was back to the Riviera in Los Angeles for the U.S. Open. Hogan liked the course, as his scores would indicate. His 4-round total of 276 was a new record. He became the first player ever to break 280 in an Open championship. The course also acquired a nickname. They called it Hogan's Alley. He also won his second and last PGA championship. He defeated Mike Ternesa at Norwood Hills in St. Louis. For the year, he won 11 tournaments, 2 of them majors. He also won the Barton Trophy, averaging 69.3 strokes per round. He was the leading money winner with $32,112. As 1948 ended, 36-year-old Ben Hogan gripped ever more firmly the top spot in professional golf. He looked forward to 1949 with great anticipation. 1949 did indeed begin with great promise for Ben and Valerie Hogan. With his newly developed but as yet unpublicized secret, he had become much more confident. He began by winning 2 of the first 4 tournaments in the West. First, the highly visible, celebrity-filled Bing Crosby, where he won for the second time. Next, he won the Long Beach Open title. In Phoenix, he had tied for first place with his friend Jimmy DeMeritt, and DeMeritt had won the playoff. The constant demands of travel and the stress of tournament competition were evident when after the tournament he had confided to a reporter, "I'm going to go home and take a rest. I want to die an old man, not a young man." So from Phoenix, Ben and Valerie headed for Fort Worth, anxious to settle into their very first new house at number 24 Valley Ridge Road. A few miles out of Van Horn, Texas, in dense morning fog, a bus heading west for El Paso crashed head-on into the Hogan car. A split second before impact, Ben threw his body sideways over Valerie, protecting her from serious injury and doubtless saving his life. The collision had driven the steering column through the back of the driver's seat. Even so, at the hospital in El Paso, with the curious name of Hotel Dieu, his injuries were found to be massive. Visiting sports writers concluded that he would never walk again, much less play golf. But emergency surgery and the Hogan resolve proved them wrong.
We really felt the early reports were that he wouldn't even live. And then, when he got past that barrier, then it was, would he ever walk again? Would he ever be able to play golf again? And I think it's probably the most incredible comeback in the history of sports, that he survived that accident and went back and worked as hard as he did and got his game back and went on to win all the things he did after that.
He was deluged with letters from well-wishers, and flowers filled his hospital room. This cool, aloof man was visibly moved by this outpouring of public concern. For 6 weeks he lay in the hospital bed in room 301. But on March 14th, his nurse, Isabel McFadden, rolled his wheelchair out on the hospital grounds into the sunshine. It was an enormous lift of the spirit and hope for the future. Back home, his reputation for hard work was evident as he began a regimen of physical therapy.
And I started working just as hard as I could work, even more than 8 hours a day. I used to putt and pitch in our bedroom at night, and it took me 11 months to get back where I could play at all. And finally, I got to where I could play a little bit, not as good as I could before, and I don't think I ever will play that good, or ever have since, even though I won some tournaments. But I was better in 1948 and 49 than I've ever been.
By midsummer, he held a golf club in his hand for the first time. In September, he was the non-playing captain of the U.S. Ryder Cup team playing in Ganton, England. After some tough competition, the U.S. team won 7-5. In December, 2 months after returning from the Ryder Cup matches, he played his first round of golf. It was at the Colonial Country Club with his close friend from the caddy days at Glen Garden, Raymond Gafford. He discounted his very good score because he was forced to ride a cart. However, at the urging of Raymond Gafford, he sent in his application to play in the Los Angeles Open to be played in January 1950.
All through that time, he had to make all this exercise and develop new, I guess, blood vessels or whatever in his legs. And he got to the point where I think he was in the best physical shape ever.
1950, the first real test. His still healing legs were wrapped in bandages from ankle to thigh. He was not expected to finish, much less win. But he played well, all except for putting. He three-putted 11 times, but in spite of that, he appeared to have won the tournament. But Sam Snead birdied 2 of the final 4 holes to tie Ben. Not surprisingly, Sam won the playoff. The legendary sports writer Grantland Rice commented,
"We're not applauding a winner or a loser. They were applauding a dead game guy, and they'll keep on applauding him. For, as a wise man once said, courage never goes out of fashion." So I have the honor, and a very great honor, of introducing a man who the record books will show lost a tournament today. He didn't lose. His legs simply were not strong enough to carry his heart around.
Meanwhile, Hollywood had noted his dramatic return to the tour. 20th Century Fox bought the film rights to the story, and Hogan was hired as technical advisor. Glenn Ford was selected to play Ben, and Ann Baxter would play Valerie. Appropriately, it was titled Follow the Sun. Ben and Valerie spent much of 1950 in Hollywood, with Ben working with Glenn Ford on the set and out on the course. To make the movie more realistic, Sam Snead, Jimmy DeMeritt, and Carrie Middlecoff played themselves in the movie. In March, they held the world premiere in Fort Worth. In the spring of 1950, Hogan headed for Augusta, Georgia, and the Masters, knowing those hills would be a severe test for his still healing legs. Jimmy DeMeritt won the tournament, but Ben played well and finished only 5 shots behind in a tie for 4th. His first win after the wreck was at Greenbrier, Sam Snead's home course. He shot a blistering 21 under par, which beat Sam by 10 strokes. Next came the big one, the U.S. Open, to be played at Marion near Philadelphia. He had proved that he was physically up to a 72-hole tournament, but this wasn't just any tournament. This was the United States Open, and in those days it required a 36-hole final on Saturday. By most standards, it was considered to be the toughest tournament in the world to win.
Oh, for more than 40 years, this what we think of as the way a U.S. Open course looks, feels, and plays was something that developed after World War II. And it's no accident at all that the great figure in golf then was Ben Hogan. And I often think that the USGA officials built their conditions around the way Ben Hogan played.
So with the physical strain on his yet healing body, plus the intense psychological stress of the Open, few people gave Hogan a chance. But for 3 rounds he played well, if not spectacularly. By the 12th hole in the final round, it was Hogan's to win. He needed only to par 4 of the last 6 holes to win. But uncharacteristically, he bogeyed 3 of the next 5 holes and came to the 72nd hole needing par to tie. That final hole was a long, tough par 4. His drive split the fairway, but he was still more than 200 yards from the green. After some intense calculating, he hit one of the epic shots in golf, a picture-perfect 2-iron onto the green 40 feet beyond the cup. From there, he 2-putted to tie Mangrum and Fazio. In the playoff, he shot a 69 and won by 4 shots for his second U.S. Open championship. Much has been made of Hogan's thorough preparation for a major tournament, and one instance at the 1950 Open at Marion underscored that. He had played the entire 4 rounds without a 7-iron in his bag. When reporters asked him why, his answer was surgical in its precision. He said, "There isn't a 7-iron shot at Marion."
Ben said about 2 or 3 weeks before a tournament, he would go out and hit each club in his bag 25 times. He'd hit each club in his bag 25 times. Then he would go to the site of the tournament and figure out what he was going to do. He'd play the course and figure out which clubs he was going to have to use the most. That I guess he figured he could drive the ball in the same position every time. I mean, that's the way he was. That he could map it out, and he would work harder with those clubs than he would the others.
Hogan was back, still in pursuit of excellence. The golfing world hailed his comeback, and his galleries mushroomed. The movie and newspaper reports have dramatized his heroism in the wreck and his determined efforts to come back. These are attributes that heroes are made of, and America and golf was waiting for just such a man. But was Hogan ready for this? Was there a change in his public persona? Was the man behind the distant stare, the taciturn demeanor, warming a bit to public attention? Even with all the distractions, Hogan still practiced relentlessly, for the sheer joy of it. And he said he knew he had to work twice as hard as the other fellows just to keep up.
I had to practice and play all the time. I told you before, my swing wasn't the best in the world, and I know it. I knew it wasn't, and I thought, well, the only way I can win is just to outwork these fellas. So they might work 2 hours a day, and I'd work 8. So then after I won a couple of tournaments, I noticed these fellas were practicing longer, and I don't know why that was, but they had to stay with me. And if it had been 12 hours during the day, I would have been out there 12 hours, because I enjoyed it.
Bobby Jones had noticed. In 1944, he said, Hogan is the hardest worker I've ever seen, not only in golf, but in any sport. He also acquired a nickname. His cold, calculating approach to a tournament featured a set jaw and an icy stare. It was readily recognized by his fellow pros, who dubbed him the Hawk, probably coined by his good friend Jimmy DeMary.
Hogan had a stare. Raymond Floyd has a great stare, but Hogan's got the greatest stare in the world. I mean, he stare right through you, make you feel like you're about an inch tall.
1951 was a benchmark year. He entered only 5 tournaments and won 3 of them, 2 of them majors. First, the title he had been chasing since 1940, the Masters. As usual, his preparation was thorough, and his first 2 rounds of 70 and 72 were solid golf, but gave no indication that this would be Hogan's year. A 2-under par 70 in the 3rd round still left him a shot behind Ski Regal and Sam Snead. His final round was a picture of precision. He shot a superb 68 to win it by 2 strokes. And an alliance was formed. His caddy for the tournament was Willie Lee Stokes, regarded by many as the greatest caddy in Augusta history. After years of coming close, it was especially satisfying to finally win it. Next was the Colonial at Fort Worth, which was sort of a tune-up for the Open. He finished in a tie for 4th.